it going, Yankee fans? My name is Alex, and my co-host here, Ryan Garcia. And today we want to discuss Brandon Nimmo, an interesting free agent option for the Yankees. I'm not sure, Ryan, if you think maybe if the Yankees don't land Aaron Judge, if they do land Aaron Judge, if they could still go after a guy like Nimmo, I think he's going to get a pretty nice payday in free agency. But a pretty solid player, 29 years old, coming off a pretty solid season with the Mets. Really good season, honestly. His second time hitting double-digit home runs. Pretty decent strikeout rate at 17.2%, walks at double digits every single season for the most part. He gets on base and is a very, very good defender. So this is a player who has a ton of value. Ryan, he only made $7 million last year. He's a free agent this year. We're looking at a pretty substantial deal for him. What are your thoughts on Brandon Nimmo and maybe the type of contract that he could garner if the Yankees were going to go after him? And do you think this is only a situation where they could really pursue if Aaron Judge isn't retained? Maybe if he is, they could invest even more, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the way I view the situation is the New York Yankees have $196 million as an estimate for their payroll after arbitration. Last season, the Yankees, in terms of luxury tax payroll, the Yankees allocated $276 million to the luxury tax payroll. So the way I see it is the New York Yankees should be at that mark again. Many people will say, you can't buy your way to a championship. I don't think you can necessarily just buy a World Series, but you know what you can do? You can buy yourself a lot of runs. You can buy yourself a lot of wins, and that will put you in a pretty good position to have good World Series odds. Look at teams that are constantly making the postseason. How many of those teams are small market teams, right? It's not many. Not saying the Yankees are a small market team, that they don't spend like a big market team, but my expectation, and I will accept nothing less, is for this team to go out and spend this offseason. So if we look at a Judge and Nimmo combination here, Judge may cost you around $39 million and Nimmo around $23 million. That still leaves you room to bring back Rizzo. If you want to move off of other contracts, you'll have even more money to play with. You could even go below that 276 mark. If you play your cards right here, you have a lot of young cost-controlled talent coming up that can allow you to cut payroll in a lot of different areas. And you have a lot of contracts that I think are quite movable. I think a lot of people underestimate the value of a league average player on the open market. As for Brandon Nimmo, the Yankees need three things, and they didn't have these three things against the Houston Astros. They didn't have enough play discipline, they didn't have enough contact, and quite frankly, they didn't have enough power. I know a lot of people are going to sit here and say, well, this is a home run or nothing offense. Well, this team hit, 2-3 home runs, maybe 4 in that postseason series against the Astros. This team didn't do anything well offensively. So I want to hit on all three of those points, and Brandon Nimmo is excellent at plate discipline. He has an excellent hit tool. Brandon Nimmo has one of the lowest swinging strike rates in baseball at 7.6%. That's even lower than Andrew Benintendi's. His 21.3% chase percentage is remarkably low. He does not expand. And when he does expand, he makes contact on roughly 70% of the pitches he swings at out of the zone. What does it tell you? He's a fighter. He's going to fight, and then at bat, he's going to foul off pitches. He may even get a hit on a pitch out of the zone. He hit 276, 274, which to a lot of people isn't enough contact or enough average, but that 367 OBP, that 10% walk rate, that 17% strikeout rate, and some pretty good power to boot. He hit 16 home runs last year and had 30 doubles. In Yankee Stadium as a lefty, I imagine that number goes up a little bit. The home runs, at least, maybe not the doubles, because Yankee Stadium is very much, you got to get into the right or left center field part of that ballpark to get a lot of doubles there. He's got great speed, great closing speed. He plays center field very deep in terms of his, his average depth when the play starts. Because he's got great closing speed, and playing back gives you a lot of range. So let's move from the left field, where you've got less ground to cover. He's got, again, great closing speed. He's in the 84th percentile in sprint speed, and put him with Bader and Judge in that outfield, and you're looking at one of the best defensive units in baseball. You're looking at a perfect leadoff option for the Yankees. Great speed, great on-base skills, decent power, top of the lineup, left-handed. Put him in front of an Aaron Judge, and put him, Judge, Rizzo, Stanton, and a guy like Torres as or maybe LeMahieu as your 1 through 5, and this team, their top of the lineup looks amazing, right? You got the contact from from Nimmo and Rizzo from the left-handed side, and you've got the right-handed power in Judge and Stanton, and this team's going to score a ton of runs, right? If you give this team Brandon Nimmo against Houston Astros, some of those closer games, I think, go in the Yankees' favor. The Astros are a very right-handed lineup, pitching staff, outside of Valdez. You don't really fear any of their lefties. I don't think they even had another lefty on their postseason roster, if I'm not mistaken. And ultimately, this team needs a bat like that. There's not a more perfect fit on the market offensively for this team. It fits everything the Yankees are looking for. This team is not going to go out and get a guy who hits 300 and slugs 300. Despite what many Yankee fans may want, this team is not going to play baseball like the 1990s. No franchise is going to operate like that. if you want contact skills, you're also going to need some power to go with it. Because look at with a guy like Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, we imagine he could be a guy who could hit 280, 290, and with no slug. And how did that turn out? He was a double play machine. He was very much up and down offensively, very much relied on batted ball luck. And when it didn't go his way, he couldn't do much damage. And when he did get a hit, it didn't do much damage because it was an extra base hit. It was oftentimes a single, which is something that, this team needs to avoid, just being able to hit, a single here, a single there, and not get it done runners in scoring position. This team needs to be able to hit those extra base hits, those doubles, those triples, those home runs, so that they can get the most out of their run scoring opportunities. There's no financial excuse. There's no baseball excuse. This team absolutely should be signing Brandon Nimmo. And if they don't, I consider it inexcusable unless some team blows him out of the water with $30 million a year for 5 years. I just don't see a reason.
Ryan, you want to know what I love? Typing in Brandon Nimmo into Google and being like, I'm going to go find some information out about Brandon Nimmo. And then I see your article and I'm like, that's the best one by far. And click on that and I can learn more about Brandon Nimmo just reading Ryan's articles than I can from the New York Post or from any other big, website here. So, Brian wrote a really great article yesterday on the Empire Sports Media website about Brandon Nimmo, what he does, what his value is, where he excels. And the plate discipline, the hit tool skills, these are the things that you've noted, is phenomenal. And, like you said, he doesn't whiff very often. He's extremely disciplined. And that's something the Yankees, like you said, haven't had, doesn't strike out a ton. He walks a really solid amount. And he doesn't whiff very often. The swinging strike is 7.6%. The average is 11.2% in the MLB. He has 4.13 pitches per plate appearance, a 3.89 MLB average. So he sees more pitches. Some of the Yankees do tend to like. I noticed that the Yankees kind of had a strategy this year where they refused to swing on the first the first pitch, and they did give up a lot of strikes that way. But they really tried to eat into the count of starting pitchers by taking that first pitch. So interesting little thing that I did notice throughout the season. But Nimmo's going to cost you a pretty penny, right? Like, you see all the metrics, all the numbers. He is fantastic in pretty much every hitting category. Hit 16 homers this past year. I think his career high was 17 back in, 2018. So he's been a Met his entire life. He knows what it's like to play in New York. He's familiar with this territory. He would fit the bill. And, I think, Ryan, that's also an interesting variable to consider. How many players have come to New York and failed? How many players have tried to, have big careers in New York, at least come here and try to do something special, like Joey Gallo, Sonny Gray, not to their own, desire, but because they were traded or whatnot. The Yankees can look at Brandon Nimmo and say he knows what it's like to play on the biggest stage. He knows what this media market is like. He can take the heat. He played for the Mets this year, had another really great season. How important do you think it is just having a guy saying, oh, you know what? He's a proven commodity. He's very, very good in New York, which I think stands out. And as a postseason hitter, he only has 3 postseason games, but he had a 38.5% on base rate with a 333 batting average over those 3 games. So he looked fantastic during the postseason. Again, small sample size, really hard to determine, but he's a plus WRC plus guy every single year, over 100. 34% better than the average player this year. Traditionally hovers around that range. Average is a 34% better than the average player across his career. So, when you're looking at him, how important do you think that he actually has experience playing in New York and the value that brings to a team like the Yankees, who right now are like, we need guys who can actually stand up and make something happen in big moments and not, fall ill to the pressure of being in this media market, and, guys like IKF who just struggle because of that.
Yeah, it's tough playing in New York. I think, we've learned, and especially with recent reports coming out, we know it's tough to play in New York. I don't think anyone's going to sit back and tell you it's not, right? His teammate, Nimmo's teammate, Chris Bassett, mentioned, there's pressure playing in New York, right? There's always going to be pressure playing in this town. That's an entirely different discussion about whether, it's always justified or not, how unfair people are to players or how fair people are, however you want to call it. But it is a tough market to play in. It's always going to be a tough market to play in. And as you mentioned, that experience, that familiarity with New York, playing, with the scrutiny of, the fans, it's important to have that experience. And I think, when you're looking at a guy with a higher contact rate and a good plate discipline, even if the power isn't there, like we saw us with LeMahieu, where he gets hurt, the power isn't there, and he kind of fell off a little bit. He's an older guy. It's obviously tougher for him. But if Nimmo was to have a small injury, he's not hitting the ball as hard down the stretch, you can still trust him to go out and hit 260, 270 and have a 360 on base because he's just so damn good at recognizing the strike zone. And throwing strikes is hard, right? I think some people forget, including myself. Throwing strikes is very difficult. It is very hard to throw a strike. especially with pitch movement nowadays, especially with how velocity is, especially with how, there's so much that goes into pitching. It is so hard to throw a strike. Now imagine trying to throw a strike 2 times in a row, 3 times in a row. It's difficult, right? So, people are going to say, well, I've seen guys strike out guys on, 3 pitches. Yeah, well, that usually requires the batter expanding in the strike zone. Typically, you don't see a pitcher throwing 5 or 6 pitches right in the strike zone. And also, umpires sometimes will give you the call. There's a lot of factors when it comes to throwing a strike. So having great plate discipline gives you a chance to at least luck your way into walks, whether it's umpire missing a called strike or the pitcher getting wild. You can recognize these things pretty easily. And I want to compare him to a guy that I think a lot of Yankee fans would refer to as, an ideal Yankee. I'm going to compare him to Paul O'Neill because I look at the adjusted strikeout percentage that O'Neill put up from 96 to 98. I look at the adjusted walk rate, right? So, Nimmo walked 26% more than the league average player this year. From 96 to 98, O'Neill walked 29% more than the average hitter. O'Neill struck out 15% less than the league average hitter. Nimmo struck out 24% less than the league average hitter. Their OBP, O'Neill is 14% better. Nimmo 17% better, average 15% better, 13% better, slugging percentage 9% better, 15% better, weighted runs created plus, offense in general 32% better for O'Neill, 34% better for Nimmo. Left-handed hitters, outfielders. I know O'Neill wasn't as fast as Nimmo, but in terms of the offensive profile, I think a lot of Yankee fans will tell you that Paul O'Neill is one of the most integral pieces. Any Yankee fan who watched that dynasty will tell you Paul O'Neill was integral to that team. That team is nowhere near as dominant and as memorable as they are now without a guy like Paul O'Neill. And I'm not sitting here and saying that Brandon Nimmo is going to go out and be, the difference maker. He is everything the Yankees have ever needed, but he is as close to an ideal player for the Yankees offensively as it gets. He brings so many things to the table for the Yankees that they have not had in years past. They tried to get it with Benintendi, and I think the difference is Benintendi just doesn't have the natural raw power nor the better plate discipline that Nimmo has. And I think that Nimmo's a better defender as well. So I look at a guy like Brandon Nimmo. A lot of people are going to say, well, can you really consider him? I quoted him as a star. I flat out called him a star player. And a lot of people are obviously not going to be, they're not going to be enthusiastic about me calling him a star player because he's not your prototypical star. But in terms of wins above replacement, in terms of player value, in terms of what he provides for you, he ranks top 20, top 25 in a lot of metrics. So I would consider that a star caliber player. And from the left-handed side of the plate, that's going to get better at Yankee Stadium. The Yankees need a guy like Nimmo. I want to emphasize, this is not me saying the Yankees would be cool if they got Brandon Nimmo. No, this is me saying if this team is dead serious about winning, I want Brandon Nimmo hitting 1 and I want Aaron Judge hitting 2 in April 2023 for the New York Yankees, because that's the start of a World Series caliber team in my eyes.
Yeah, that's very reasonable. And you're looking at the contract that Nimmo's probably going to get. So SpotRack has Nimmo's market value at $14.1 million per season. So it's a projected 4 to 5 year, $56 million deal, which is reasonable. Like I can say, that's a pretty reasonable number. The Yankees could afford that, especially if they manage to offload Hicks and Donaldson's contract. They could probably save enough money and afford that. But the problem is that center field market this year is very thin. A team could look at Judge and say, put him in center field. But again, he's over 30 years old. Most of the center fielders this year are over 30 years old. And with that being said, Nimmo's 29. So you're looking at a player who has a lot of his best baseball ahead of him and, is in his prime and probably going to be a little more expensive because of that market. Aside from Judge. So the more realistic contract, you're looking at 4 to 5 years, $100 million, probably 5 years, $100 million, looking at a $20 million a year deal, which is pretty substantial. You know what I mean? Like Judge is going to get probably 36 to $40 million. So Nimmo gets about half of that. It's difficult to determine if it's worthwhile. I mean, Nimmo has only played 147 games in his career in left field. And if you retain Judge, you have Bader in center, or would you shift that up? Would you say if you have Judge, do you put Judge in right field, Bader in left, and Nimmo in center? I don't think so. I think you probably just throw Nimmo into left field and keep Bader in center field. Would you go with that?
Yeah, Bader's a better defensive center fielder. I think the arm's a lot better on Bader as well in terms of just how he sets up. And the range is better. So you acquired Bader to be a center fielder. I think if you move him to left field, you kind of kill a lot of his value. And Nimble's had experience playing left field in the past. I believe he has 7 defensive runs saved and 5 outs above average, or maybe it's flipped around, 5 defensive runs saved and 7 outs above average. But he's a great defensive left fielder as well. He played in New York with the Mets, and Citi Field's very spacious. So this isn't like him playing in a small ballpark. This is him playing a large ballpark. He's played a variety of outfield positions. Could he have like a Joey Gallo type struggle where at first he doesn't look the best in left field? Maybe. Do I anticipate that? No.
Yeah, I mean, so you're looking at the Yankees are clearing $42 million in money with just a couple of notable names in Aroldis Chapman, Joey Gallo, and Zach Britton. Those three guys alone are clearing about $42 million. You throw on top of that Donaldson and Hicks, you're looking at $65-70 million to spend. You could sign Judge and Nimmo, and the Yankees are keeping their entire starting pitching rotation aside from Jameson Taillon, who they could easily let walk and just throw Domingo Germán into that fifth role and, sign a more price-efficient guy, cost-efficient guy, because Taillon's probably going to get a little bit more money after having a pretty solid season. The Mets are even, I heard, might be looking at him. So they could afford those two guys. And then if you go for Judge and Nimmo, lock your outfield down, you have probably the best outfield in baseball, if not one of the best, with Bader, Judge, and Nimmo. Look at your infield now. You could keep IKF, put him at third base. You obviously have Peraza, put him at shortstop. Maybe you trade Gleyber Torres. Maybe you don't. You keep him at second base. You still have DJ LeMahieu who could play everyday second base. Then you have Rizzo, who you also got to extend, who's going to be like $18 million a year. So there is a couple of interesting decisions the Yankees do have to make. It really just depends on how much money Steinbrenner is willing to spend. Does he want to push past that last luxury tax threshold, or does he want to stay below it? Because that's going to determine really how far the Yankees can go in free agency. If they don't get Judge, they're going to sign a flurry of players who are going to be pretty good players. You could get Nimmo. You could go and get, bring back Rizzo. You could get a solid shortstop. You could do some pretty good stuff if Judge walks. If you keep him, it kind of straps you because I feel like Steinbrenner is going to be a little bit conservative after Judge. It does strap you a little bit unless you're able to get rid of Hicks and Donaldson. But the question is, if you want to get rid of both of their contracts in full, you're going to have to pair them with a really good prospect. And I don't think the Yankees are willing to do that. I think Peraza is probably cemented as a starter right now. Of course, you have Oswaldo Cabrera. And if you trade Gleyber Torres, maybe Oswaldo Cabrera is your everyday second baseman and DJ LeMahieu is just your utility guy and vice versa. So there's a couple different things the Yankees can do. This is going to be an interesting offseason, but it all really revolves around what they do with Aaron Judge. He's the catalyst here, whether they go and spend big on a couple players or whether they have to be a little bit more conservative. So we'll see how things shape out. Free agency starts, I believe, November 9th, if I'm not mistaken. So coming up very, very quickly. Things are probably going to move pretty quickly because last year things were rather slow because they were waiting until the collective bargaining agreement was figured out. They were waiting to see how that would affect players. So the Yankees waited until really late to get things done. But free agency probably will get going pretty quickly here in November, and it should be really fun. There's going to be a lot of news to discuss. So we'll got you guys covered on the daily with breakdowns of specific players like this and guys we think that could fit the bill well for the Yanks. But hopefully you guys enjoy this episode. Make sure to like, subscribe. As always, love your opinions below on Brandon Nimmo, what you think about him, if you think the Yankees might consider pursuing him. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your Friday. Have a drink. Pour one out for the Yankees this year. And we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Yankees episode.